Welcome back to the Barrister's Backlog Gamers. Today we'll be tackling our first Pokemon game on the channel. No, it isn't the recent release, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, though I'll have much to say on these games in a future video, or even a mainline title at all actually, but instead we're reviewing the popular spin-off title, Pokemon Colosseum. Colosseum was developed by Genius Sorority, published by the Pokemon Company, and released for the Nintendo GameCube in March of 2004 for Western audiences. Despite being an avid Pokemon fan who has played every mainline game in the series, I never had the opportunity to play Colosseum, so I decided to start my Colosseum journey nearly 20 years after its initial release. Overall, I believe Colosseum is a fantastic entry in the Pokemon series and is able to outshine some of Game Freak's most recent releases and has me wishing for a return to form for the series as a whole as Pokemon nears its 30th anniversary. Let's get started. To set the stage, Pokemon Colosseum was shown to the public at E3 2003 and featured Pokemon models ported from the Nintendo 64 classics, Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2. North American pre-orders actually included a bonus disc that allowed players to download the mythical Pokemon Jirachi onto their Game Boy Advance copies of Pokemon Ruby or Sapphire. Upon release, Colosseum was a critical and commercial success. It sold over 1 million copies in the United States and nearly 700,000 in Japan, with combined worldwide sales reaching nearly 2.5 million copies. A successor, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, will be released for the GameCube in 2005, which will be the subject of a future video on this channel. At its core, Pokemon Colosseum is about battling. There are no wild Pokemon to be caught, no contests to win, no gym leaders to overcome, or anything else you would typically find in a mainline release. Instead of picking a starter Pokemon and going on an adventure to catch them all and defeat the Elite Four, you begin Colosseum as a former member of the evil team Snag'em named Wes, or whatever you choose to name him, but his canonical name is Wes. The opening cutscene sees you blow a hole in the Snag'em headquarters, steal their handheld snagging machine, and ride off into the desert on a flying motorcycle. As an adult playing this game now, I'm sure my 12-year-old self would have lost his mind at the prospect of playing as an evil team member, and even now, it's pretty damn cool. As you flee the scene of your recent arson and theft, you make your way to Phoenix City and meet Rui, the game's companion character. There's honestly not much to say about Rui other than she exists and can see shadow Pokemon. She has no character growth, no real character traits, and nothing interesting to add to the story. She exists as a protagonist's mouthpiece, since Wes stays silent throughout the entire game. Once you interact with Rui, you learn that Team Cypher, another evil organization present in the Ore region, is creating shadow Pokemon to help them take over the world. These shadow Pokemon have had their hearts closed off and will even attack people without warning. Rui suggests using your newly stolen handheld snagging machine to capture and purify these shadow Pokemon to stop Cypher's evil plot. This leads our heroes on a quest across the Ore region, where they will battle memorable characters such as Mirror B, Dakum, and the team's Cypher leader Ephus, capture nearly 50 different shadow Pokemon, and ultimately save the world. With the synopsis out of the way, it's easy to see that the story of Colosseum isn't earth-shatteringly deep or complex, but is at least as interesting for the bare-bones stories Game Freak typically dishes out. The ideas that exist in Colosseum at least equate to more than the traditional mainline plot. A 10-year-old goes on a journey, interacts with an evil team, captures a world-destroying monster to foil the plan of said evil team, and then battles the strongest trainer in the land to become the champion. For that, I have to give Colosseum credit. Gameplay in Colosseum is also a departure from the norm. Instead of traveling down routes and venturing through caves to arrive at the next city, Wes and Rui ride the flying motorcycle from town to town to progress the story. This is not to say there aren't caves or explorable paths in the game, they are just compartmentalized into the towns themselves instead of spread out on routes. Pokemon battles in this game are also slightly different. Instead of the tried and true 1v1 battles like all Pokemon titles, Colosseum is a double battle system where 2 Pokemon take to the battlefield for each trainer. This slight mix-up presents a modicum of strategy into the game, allowing battles to expand slightly beyond the loop of clicking the strongest attack until the opposing Pokemon was defeated. While exploration in the game is nothing to write home about, and non-Pokemon fans may have a hard time finding a reason to continue playing a game so devoid of exploration, the gameplay loop and story beats present in Colosseum was a step in the right direction for the franchise as a whole, in my opinion. While Colosseum is fun to play for a Pokemon diehard like myself, there are faults here. The gameplay is slow, excruciatingly slow at times. Rui is annoying and gets in the way of the progression more than she helps. The graphics, even by 2004 standards, are subpar, and the game is far from the best graphics available on the GameCube. The lack of Pokemon variety available in a playthrough of Colosseum also means that almost every playthrough of the game is nearly identical. Out of the 48 possible Pokemon you can capture and purify in the game, there are barely 15 of those usable if you plan on beating the game without an insane amount of grinding. The final gauntlet available to obtain the ultimate prize in this game, the legendary Pokemon Ho-Oh, is a 100 battle onslaught that must be defeated after a player purifies all 48 Shadow Pokemon. The task of purification is an ordeal on its own, however, that can cause a player to spend large amounts of time collecting money to buy perfumes to make a Pokemon happy, battling to decrease a Pokemon's shadow gauge, or simply setting up a controller and letting Wes walk into a wall continuously overnight. Either way, purifying all 48 Pokemon is no small feat, and getting Ho-Oh isn't either. Overall, I believe Colosseum is a good game, but its slow pacing, repetitive purification process, and limited Pokemon variety hold it back from being a great game. Colosseum's bold choice to take the franchise in a completely different direction from its handheld counterpart, interesting game world in the Ore region, and plethora of wacky characters make it a memorable experience that holds a special place in the hearts of many fans. It's truly a fantastic example of how the Pokemon franchise can experiment and still deliver a compelling adventure that many want to play. If you're a Pokemon fan who has yet to experience Colosseum and are looking for something different after Scarlet and Violet's messy launch, or simply curious about the lore of Shadow Pokemon, then Colosseum is definitely worth checking out. Just be prepared for a bit of a grind if you want to see everything the game has to offer, including capturing the elusive in-game Ho-Oh. As always, thanks for joining me on the Barrister's Backlog. Be sure to give this video a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Let me know in the comments what you think of Pokemon Colosseum, or tell me your favorite Pokemon, or better yet, let me know what game you want to see me review next. Until next time, gamers.